Hello students, today's topic is sexual parts of flowering plants. Starting before sexual reproduction, we all have knowing some important parts of the flowering plants which help in sexual reproduction. Flower of the plant is main reproductive part of plants. Sexual reproduction possible in plant's flower. Flower has four important parts which helps sexual reproduction. First part is sepal, generally called calyx. Second part is petals, called corolla. Next important and reproductive part of androecium. It is the male part of flower. Next is gynoecium. It is female part of flower. So this is the structure of flower with male and female reproductive parts. First we seen its green color structure which is the base of flower. That's called pedicel. Pedicel is the attaching part of flower with the plants. The upper of pedicel present in sepals. Sepals are the first part of plant's flower. It is green color and with chlorophyllus. Sometimes it helps photosynthesis is minor process. The middle part of plant flower called receptacle. It is the base of flower. The upper part of sepals attached colored part which called petals. It is bright colored structure and cover the male and female parts of flower. The next part is this, starting here and ending here, thread-like structure. It's called androecium and this part is called gynoecium. Sepal is also called calyx. It is generally green color and help the photosynthesis process. Petals have generally bright and vivid colors. It helps attract to insects, birds and others for the process is complete in pollination. Next is androecium. So this chart androecium or stamen. The main part of male part of flower is called androecium or stamen. Stamen has two parts, anther and filament. Anther is upper part of male part and filament is lower part of filament. It is thread-like structure attached anther and sepals. So this structure, its bag-like structure is anther and thread-like structure is filament. Whole parts called stamen or androecium. These parts have many pollen grains, which is the male reproductive gametes or unit of the flower. This is the structure of one anther and section cutting of one anther. This holus structure is this. It's round shaped structure called pollen sac and its grain like structure is pollen grain. Its outer walls called epidermis, middle layer called fibrous layer and last is called tapetum. These pollen grains also called pollen mother cells. But pollen mother cells are diploid and pollen grains are haploid. So this structure, one pollen grains is minor structure and many pollen grains contained in one pollen sac. Next is pistil. Pistil and gynoecium. Gynoecium is the female reproductive organs of flower. The middle, show this structure, the middle part of flower called gynoecium or pistils. This upper part is velvet-like structure, soft, spongy. This called a stigma. Middle layer is thin, tubulous structure called a style. And last part of pistil or androecium is thick, round-shaped structure called ovaries. Sepals and petals shape this part and cover this part. It is very soft part, so it contains very hard careness. In this structure, one word shows hole 1, hole 2, hole 3 and hole 4. What is this hole 1, hole 2 and hole 3 and hole 4? Hole means rounded structure. First, sepal. Covered is all flower. That's called hole 1. Means sepals covered firstly all over flower. Second, hole 2. Hole 2 means secondary covered flower with petals. So, petals called hole 2. Tertiary anthers covered means here this structure shows two anthers, but in one flower, many anthers cover the pistil. So this structure called hole 3, and third is hole and next is hole 4, last and covered structure with ovules called hole 4. This structure help pollination. When mature pollen grains in this pollen sac, then pollination process is start. After fertilization, pollination is the main important process of sexual reproductions. So, here we discussed what is pollination and how gynoecium and androecium help the pollination, which type pollination present in flower, and what is important pollination of flower. So, complete this topic structure of flower with male and female reproductive parts, so that male part is anther or stamen, that's called androecium, and female parts is gynoecium, that's called pistil. Pistil have 3 parts: stigma, style and ovary. Ovaries form ovules. So this structure, beads like structure is ovules. Here is fertilization complete and embryo are formed. Then after fertilization or ovulation, fruits are made and last seeds are made. So the next step of reproduction is pollination. Pollination is defined as the process of transfer of pollen grains whose made in pollen sac. Transfer of pollen grains from an anther to the stigma. Anther to the stigma of same flower and or different flower. Repeating again, the process of transfer of pollen grains from an anther to stigma of same flower or of different flower is called pollination. Pollination is basically two types pollination present in angiosperm plants. Do you all know what is angiosperm plant? Angiosperm plant is flowering plant whose made flower, fruits and seeds. Do you know that plants are mostly two type, angiosperm and gymnosperm. Gymnosperm is non-flowering plant and angiosperm is flowering plant. So all these process contains in angiosperm plants. You also ask angiosperm plants or flowering plants. So flowering plants or angiosperm plants have two type pollination presents. First is self-pollination or autogamy. Second is cross-pollination or allogamy. Then what is self-pollination? If the pollen grains are transferred from another to stigma or the same flower, the pollen grains transferred from anther to stigma, the same flower or process is called self-pollination or autogamy. Second is If these are transferred, if these are means if pollen grains are transferred from an anther to a stigma of a flower on different plant is called cross-pollination or allogamy. So this structure define the self-pollination. When anther to stigma goes in same plants, their flower stigma and their pollen grains transferred to, and next is same plants, same flowers transferred to pollen grains and to a stigma called self pollination. Next is pollen grains transferred to other plants, other flowers stigma by a medium like insects, air, waters called cross pollination. Self pollination have no mediums, but in cross pollination not possible without medium like insects, air, water and animals, etc. Next is contributions for self pollination or capability of self pollination. Who's capable self pollinations? Plant or flowers have bisexually or hermaphrodite. Self pollination is possible if flowers are bisexual because if male and female parts present in same flower, then self pollination is possible. Second is homogamy. Homogamy means if both sex organ, androecium and gynoecium, of a flower should mature at same time. It is most important part of self pollination. If both sex organ not mature in same time, then self pollination is not possible. So male and female sex organ should mature at the same time. The next and exceptional case of self pollination is cleistogamy. In some plants like Commelina, Archis, Oxalix, etc., are anther mature and burst, liberating their pollen grains in a closed flower. Such type plants have two types flower. One undergoes closed flower. These called cleistogamous. These are ground nuts present or cleistogamy self pollination present in ground nuts. Ground nuts have underground closed flower. So this structure cleistogamy flower of Camelina. These flowers are normally grows and both undergrounds. Self pollination is present these flowers. This process is called cleistogamous self pollination. Next is cross pollination. Contributions for cross pollination or advantages for cross pollination. First ability of cross pollination is unisexually. Means flowers are unisexual. Stamens and carpels are found in different flowers. Unisexuality can be two types. First is monoecious plant and second is dioecious plant. Monoecious plant, when male and female flower are born on same plant, and when male and female flower are born on different plants called dioecious. But male and female plant not mature in same time. So monoecious plant have unisexuality and cross pollination is present. Next is the next condition is self sterility and incapability. In this condition, the pollen grains of same flower cannot fertilize their own ovules as they do not germinate on a stigma of same flower. Next is dichogamy. Dichogamy is main important ability of cross pollination. In many hermaphrodite or monoecious flower, stamen and carpel or pollen grains and stigma of a flower do not mature at same time. Dichogamy is two type, protandry and protogyny. Protandry means anther of a flower mature earlier than carpel, and protogyny is carpel of a flower mature earlier than stamen. In jasmine, pagets and sunflowers present protandry process. Pollenthea and Annona miscela has protogyny process. Cross pollination possible many mediums, for example by air, by water, by insects, by animals. When pollination or pollen grains transferred from anther of one flower to a stigma of different flowers by wind called Anemophily. These are important points when pollen grains from anther transferred to one flower and to another flower called anemophily. When transferred pollen grains from anther to stigma, one flower to different another flower's stigma by water called hydrophily. Anemophily present in maize, grains, etc. And hydrophily, cross pollination, present mostly aquatic plants. For example, Vallisneria. So this structure Vallisneria. These are the female plants of one female flower of one plant and male flower of another plant. These are antherlope which present pollen grains and different flower or stigma. Medium is water. Help the medium water. These anther attached or male flower attached in different female flowers and transferred to pollen grains in these flower stigma. These called hydrophily, cross pollination. So this structure pollination in salvia plants by insects. When pollen grains to the anther transferred to different flowers stigma by insects called entomophily. Pollination in salvia present the medium insects. So pollination of salvia is called entomophily. Entomophily pollination contains when pollen grains are sticky or with spinous exine. Petals are colorful, bright in color. Special smelled or produces nectars which attack the insects and pollination is possible. So main probability of entomology flowers will have very attractive and smelled. Next, when pollen grains transferred from anther of one flower to the stigma of different flower by birds called ornithophily. Tiny birds like hummingbirds and honey thrushes feeds on nectar of flower like bignonia and erythronia. Flowers present ornithophily, cross pollination. Next is pollination by birds called chiroptophily. Chiroptophilia type pollination is complete by bats. These flowers present pollination by bats. It's generally large size, open in night and produces large amount of nectar. For example, kadamb plant pollinated by bats. Next important topic of events in sexual reproductions. Main events of sexual reproduction is three: pre-fertilization, fertilization and post-fertilization. Pre-fertilization events are when gametogenesis. Gametogenesis means the process of gametes formation in sexually reproducing organs, and gamete transferred. Gamete transferred means male and female gametes contacts each other are two main process of pre-fertilization events. Then the composition of gametogenesis, formation of gametes with the help of reproducing organism, and transfer of gametes called pre-fertilization events. In human beings, after formation of male and female gametes, both must be physical brought together to facilitate fusion or fertilization, and in plants pollen grains germinate on the stigma and pollen tubes carrying the male gametes reach the ovule and discharge male gametes near the egg, called gamete transfer. Next event of sexual reproduction is fertilization. Successful transfer and coming together of gametes is essential for the most critical event in sexual reproduction, the fertilization. In easily the fertilization process of fusion of male and female gametes, male or human beings or plants, is called syngamy. The completion of syngamy, diploid zygote are formed. We already discussed external and internal fertilization. When transformation of gametes reach on outside of the body is called external fertilization, and when gametes are reached in internal side of the body then fused, called internal fertilization in shortly. The next is post fertilization events. When diploid zygote is formed as a result of fertilization in organism with external fertilization, zygote is formed in external medium like water, earth, whereas in those inhibiting internal fertilization, zygote is formed inside the body of organism. Events in sexual reproduction after the formation of zygote. The main important point of events in sexual reproduction after the formation of zygote is called post-fertilization events. Complete in post-fertilization events, development of embryo from the zygote is called embryogenesis. Development of zygote is called zygote formation, and development of embryo is called embryogenesis. In plants, after fertilization, ovary develops into fruits and ovules mature into seed. In animals, zygote start developing soon after its formation. So in next video, I will explain sexuality in plants. So here we stopped this chapter and this topic. Next video I was explained sexual reproduction in plants and sexual reproduction in human beings. So I stopped this topic and write some homework of this topic. First question is why cross-pollination is better than self-pollination. Next, write the reproductive part of flower and its work. Next is the main important process after the fertilization is pollination. Write some suggestive points. Thank you.